My name is Claire, and I was 32 years old the morning everything changed. At sunrise, our bedroom curtains let in that gentle golden light that makes even the mess of everyday life seem softer than it is. For a brief moment, I remember thinking how safe it all felt. My husband Thomas stirring beside me, his hair still rumpled from sleep, his arm reaching lazily across the sheets to silence his alarm. We'd been married for 6 years, together for 9, and even then, when his eyes found mine in the half-light, I felt that flutter. The one that tricks you into believing you've chosen the right partner, the right life. Coffee? He mumbled with that crooked smile that always looked rehearsed but charming. It was our routine. He brewed the coffee. I made the bed. Predictable, ordinary, safe. Back then, I would have described our marriage as comfortable. Not passionate, not wild, but stable. We lived in a modern 2-bedroom apartment overlooking the city park. His career in finance paid most of the bills, while I worked from the second bedroom, editing manuscripts for a publishing house that had gone remote after the pandemic. Our roles were clear, our days organized like clockwork. Yet even within that routine, shadows lingered. I wanted children. I wanted us to start building a family before it was too late. Thomas, though, always had reasons to delay. Promotions, savings goals, the uncertain economy. Every time I pressed, he pressed back with charm or logic, until I felt like the unreasonable one. Only last month had he finally agreed. After the holidays, he'd said, kissing my forehead as though sealing the promise. We'll start our family after the holidays. I remember smiling, holding on to that sentence as if it were a lifeline. That morning, I buried myself in manuscripts, 3 of them stacked on my desk, their margins already filled with my notes. I joked with Thomas across the apartment as he left for work. Make it strong, I called. I've got too much reading to survive without it. You always have too much reading, he laughed back from the kitchen. His laugh then made me warm inside. Now, when I remember it, it makes my stomach knot. At 9:47 a.m., I was mid-video call with an author, discussing revisions to Chapter 12 of her novel, when the pain struck. Sharp, blinding, like a hot blade twisting in my abdomen. The laptop slid from my lap as I doubled over, gasping. Claire, are you okay? The author's voice sounded distant, warped, as though I were underwater. I ended the call without answering, crawling toward the bathroom, cold sweat breaking across my back. The pain spread quickly from my right side, radiating outward, relentless and jagged. For a wild moment I thought food poisoning, but we'd eaten the same dinner last night. Appendicitis. The word floated up through the haze, my sister's voice echoing from years ago when she'd gone through it in college. She had described it exactly like this. Thomas, I croaked, barely audible. He was in his office on a conference call, but when my text buzzed his phone, something's wrong, hospital now, he came running. I've never seen him move so quickly. He scooped me from the floor as if I were weightless, grabbed my purse and keys, and half carried me to the car. At each red light, his hand tightened around mine. It's going to be okay. I've got you, he repeated, like a mantra meant for both of us. The emergency room blurred together, white walls, fluorescent lights, the rush of nurses and questions I could barely answer. Thomas took control, handling insurance cards, paperwork, the stream of medical jargon I was too disoriented to follow. I clung to his presence, letting myself believe I was safe in his hands. Tests, ultrasounds, needles. The doctor finally confirmed acute appendicitis. We need to operate today, he said, his voice brisk but reassuring. The good news is, we've caught it before it ruptured. Thomas nodded, asking questions about recovery time, risks, anesthesia. He typed everything into his phone, precise as always. His efficiency was comforting in that moment. I thought, this is what marriage is supposed to be. Someone to carry the weight when you can't. They moved me into a pre-op room, dimly lit, curtains half drawn around the bed. The surgical nurse entered, an older woman with kind eyes behind thick glasses. Clipboard in hand, she explained the procedure, then hesitated, squinting at her paperwork. Just need to confirm both procedures, she murmured. I frowned, confused through the fog of painkillers. Both? Before I could finish, Thomas interrupted, his hand pressing gently on my shoulder. We already discussed this with the doctor, he said quickly, his voice firm but smooth. She's in a lot of pain. Can we please move this along? The nurse looked uncertain but nodded. Of course. Just need her signature here. Thomas guided the clipboard to me, his fingers steady on mine. My head swam from the morphine, words on the page blurring into one another. I scrawled something resembling my name. What? Second procedure? I slurred. My tongue felt heavy, uncooperative. Shh, Thomas whispered, kissing my forehead. Don't worry about it, baby. Just rest. I'll be right here when you wake up. They wheeled me down the corridor, the anesthesiologist murmuring instructions, telling me to count backwards from 10. 10, 9, 8. Second procedure. 7, 6. The thought flickered like a weak flame. 5, 4. Darkness swallowed it. When I woke, it was like surfacing from deep underwater. My throat burned from the breathing tube. My limbs felt heavy, pinned by invisible weights. The recovery room hummed softly with machines. A young nurse adjusted my IV line, her braids pulled neatly into a ponytail. There she is, she said warmly. How are you feeling, Claire? Thirsty, I croaked. She helped me sip water through a straw. That's normal. The surgery went well. You're going to be fine. Relief began to wash through me, but then I tried to sit up. Pain shot through my abdomen, expected, but also lower, deeper, where it shouldn't have been. My expression must have betrayed me, because the nurse hesitated. It hurts down there, I whispered, gesturing vaguely. Is that normal? For appendicitis? Her hand stilled. She glanced toward the door, then back to me, her voice dropping low. Didn't they tell you, she asked, eyes flickering nervously, about the second procedure? The heart monitor beside me began to beat faster. Second procedure. The words cut through the haze like ice. I shook my head, suddenly awake, the edges of the room sharpening around me. What second procedure? I whispered. What did they do to me? The nurse's face tightened, sympathy and fear mingling in her eyes. She closed the curtain around my bed before answering. Your husband approved something, she whispered. Something you didn't sign for. The monitor spiked again, echoing the wild rush of my heartbeat. My voice trembled, louder now. What did he do? She shook her head, biting her lip as though she'd already said too much. I'm not supposed to discuss it. The doctor will explain. But her eyes told me enough. Something had been done to me while I slept. Something I never agreed to. And Thomas, my husband, the man I trusted to protect me, had made it happen. The minutes after that whisper felt endless. The nurse, Kelsey, she said her name was, kept checking the monitors, her hands steady, but her eyes restless, like a person holding back words too heavy to share. I gripped the sheet with shaking fingers. What did they do? My voice cracked, sounding more like a plea than a demand. I'm sorry, Claire, she whispered, glancing nervously toward the door. I can't explain. Dr. Anders will be here soon. He'll tell you. The way she said he'll tell you chilled me, as if the doctor wasn't going to ask or apologize, but simply deliver facts. Facts about my own body that I hadn't been allowed to decide. I grabbed her wrist, desperation spilling out of me. Please, just tell me. Her eyes softened, but she pulled her hand free. I could lose my job. Just wait for Dr. Anders. Then she slipped out, leaving me in the sterile half-light with only the sound of my own ragged breathing and the steady beeping of machines. I reached for my phone on the bedside table. My hands trembled so badly I nearly dropped it. I called Thomas, once, twice, 3 times, straight to voicemail. Where was he? The door finally opened an hour later. Dr. Anders entered, tall, silver-haired, with the kind of polished presence that hospitals seem to value. He pulled a chair up to my bed, his tone calm, practiced. Mrs. Morrison, how are you feeling? What was done to me? I blurted, my throat raw. He sighed as though I were a difficult patient. I think it's best if we focus on your recovery first. You've been through a lot. Tell me, I snapped, louder this time. He adjusted his coat, pulled out a tablet, and scrolled with deliberate slowness. During the appendectomy, we also performed a minor procedure to address a gynecological issue your husband expressed concern about. The words felt unreal, as if he'd spoken them in a foreign language. What procedure? A tubal ligation. He said it with the casualness of announcing the weather. Your husband assured us this had been discussed extensively, that you'd been nervous, but had already agreed. Since you were already under anesthesia, we decided it would be best to address it at the same time, sparing you additional stress. I blinked at him, waiting for him to correct himself. He didn't. You sterilized me? My voice was a whisper, hollow and cold. It's a very common procedure, he said smoothly. Completely reversible through IVF if you change your mind. The room tilted sideways. My breath came sharp, shallow, like I was drowning. My hands clutched the rails of the bed as if the world might slip away otherwise. "You had no right," I hissed, my voice breaking. "None. I never agreed to this. Get out! Get out!" He looked almost offended. "Mrs. Morrison, everything was done according to protocol. Your husband had full medical power of attorney. He—" "Get out!" The words came out as a scream this time. He stood, adjusting his coat again, and left with the dignity of a man who still believed himself in the right. When the door shut, I collapsed against the pillow, shaking so violently the IV line tugged at my skin. My chest heaved, my stomach twisted, and every muscle ached, but none of it compared to the weight pressing on my soul. Sterilized, without my consent. A quiet knock. Then Kelsey reappeared, her expression full of sympathy. Without a word, she handed me a manila folder. "I shouldn't be doing this," she whispered, "but you deserve to see it." Inside was a copy of the surgical consent form. My name sprawled across the bottom, but it wasn't mine. The letters were shaped wrong. The C too narrow, the Y in my last name curved instead of straight. A forgery. And there, beneath it, Thomas's signature. Clean, confident, undeniable. Along with a note. Patient's husband confirms previous discussions regarding permanent birth control. Patient experiences anxiety regarding separate procedure. Recommends completion during appendectomy. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. He had done this. Thomas, the man I'd trusted to hold my life in his hands, had signed away my future as though it were his to give. Why? That question echoed louder than the monitor beeping, louder than the voices in the hallway. Why would he take away the one thing I wanted most? By the time Thomas arrived the next morning, I had cried myself hollow. My fury had burned down to ashes, leaving only a brittle calm. He entered with flowers. White roses, my favorite. He smiled, that practiced, charming smile, and kissed my forehead. "How are you feeling, baby?" "What did you do?" My voice was flat, drained. His smile faltered just slightly. "What do you mean?" "The tubal ligation," I said. "What did you do?" He blinked, then pulled up the chair beside me, his expression shifting into concern. Not surprise, but concern. "Claire, honey, you're still groggy from the anesthesia. You're confused." I held up the papers Kelsey had given me. "You forged my signature. You sterilized me without my consent." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Once, I'd found that gesture endearing. Now it looked like the tick of a liar preparing another story. "Claire, we talked about this. Remember? You said you were terrified of childbirth. You had that panic attack at dinner with Sarah and her baby. You said pregnancy scared you. I was protecting you." "That never happened," I snapped. "Sarah hasn't visited in months, and I want children. We were going to start after the holidays, you promised." "Baby, you've been under a lot of stress," he said softly, his voice dropping into that patronizing register that made me want to scream. "You're emotional, confused. I did what was best for us, for our future." "Our future?" My voice shook. "You took away my choice." He leaned forward, his tone firmer now. "Children would ruin everything we've built. Our lifestyle, your career, our relationship. You know this deep down. You'll thank me one day." Hormonal, emotional, confused. Those words rattled around my skull, each one a weapon disguised as concern. "Get out," I said quietly. "Claire, don't be dramatic." "Get out." For a moment, he looked like he might argue, but then, with a final adjustment of his tie, he stood. "I'll come back when you're more rational." The door clicked shut. I was alone again, but not broken. Not yet. I picked up my phone with trembling hands and called Julie. My best friend answered on the first ring. "Finally. I've been worried sick. How was the surgery?" "They sterilized me," I whispered. "He had them sterilize me?" Silence on the line. Then Julie's voice exploded. "What? Claire, what are you talking about?" Through tears and gasps, I told her everything. The forged signature, Thomas's gaslighting, the doctor's calm cruelty. "That bastard," Julie spat. "Claire, we literally talked about IVF 3 weeks ago. You showed me bookmarked fertility clinics. You were picking baby names. You're not crazy. He's the one who's sick." Her anger steadied me, pulling me back from the spiral of doubt Thomas had tried to trap me in. Julie's voice hardened. "I'm coming to get you. You're not going home with him. Not now, not ever." I hung up, clutching the phone to my chest, staring at the bouquet of white roses on the nightstand. Once they'd meant love. Now they looked like a funeral offering. The funeral of my trust. the funeral of the life I thought I had. Julie arrived at the hospital faster than I thought possible. She burst into the room, her dark hair windblown, her face flushed with fury. When she saw me, pale against the white sheets, her eyes filled with tears, but her anger blazed brighter. "Oh my God, Claire!" She rushed to my side, gripping my hand tightly. "Tell me everything again." I handed her the folder Kelsey had slipped me. Julie flipped through the pages, her mouth tightening with each line she read. When she saw the forged signature, she swore under her breath. "That son of a bitch," she muttered. "He thinks he can erase your entire future with the stroke of a pen? He doesn't know who he's dealing with." Her outrage steadied me, helped me breathe. I needed her fire because mine had burned down to smoldering ash. The hospital discharged me that afternoon, despite my protests. Insurance only covered one night for an uncomplicated appendectomy. The nurses helped me dress slowly, careful of the fresh scars on my abdomen. Julie hovered protectively, glaring at every staff member as though they personally shared Thomas's guilt. By the time we pulled into the apartment, the city lights had started to blur against the dusk. I hesitated at the door, dread crawling up my spine. The thought of stepping back into the space I once called home made my stomach turn. Julie squeezed my shoulder. "You don't have to go in if you're not ready. We'll figure something out. You can stay with me." But I shook my head. "No, I need to see it. I need to face him." The apartment was quiet when we entered. Too quiet. Thomas's shoes weren't by the door, his briefcase missing from its usual place on the counter. Relief and disappointment mingled in my chest. Julie helped me to the couch, made me tea in the same kitchen where Thomas and I had shared countless ordinary mornings. The contrast nearly broke me. "I can't stay here," I whispered, staring at the mug in my hands. "But I can't leave yet, either. There's something in his office. I know it." Julie raised an eyebrow. "You think he left proof?" I nodded. "He's meticulous. He documents everything. He wouldn't have done this without covering his tracks." Her mouth curved into a grim smile. "Then let's find it." We walked to the closed door of Thomas's office. It had always been off-limits. His sanctuary, as he called it. I used to respect that boundary, never questioning what went on inside. Now, that locked door felt like a vault hiding the truth. I twisted the handle. Locked. Julie's eyes narrowed. Where would he keep the key? We searched every obvious place, under the doormat, taped above the doorframe, hidden in kitchen drawers. Nothing. Finally, Julie paused by the hallway photo frames. She lifted one down, our wedding photo, and checked the back. Taped behind the smiling faces of our younger selves was a small silver key. "Unbelievable," she muttered, handing it to me. "Hiding lies behind the picture of vows he never intended to keep." The lock clicked open and we stepped inside. The office was immaculate. File cabinets lined the walls, drawers labeled neatly by year and client name. His desk was spotless, every pen aligned, his laptop closed precisely at the center. It looked less like a workspace and more like a showroom, a stage where he performed control. I pulled open drawer after drawer, each filled with spreadsheets, contracts, tax documents. Everything ordinary, until Julie pointed to the bottom left drawer. "This one's different." It had a combination lock instead of a key. "Try your anniversary," Julie suggested. I did. Nothing. "His birthday?" Nothing. I was about to give up when I remembered something from years ago. Early in our relationship, Thomas had told me about his lucky number, 2743. He used it for everything back then, before password managers and two-factor authentication. I spun the dial, 2743. The drawer opened with a soft click. Inside were folders, envelopes, and printed documents that made my stomach twist. Medical brochures about tubal ligation. Articles about the child-free lifestyle, annotated in his handwriting. Notes about financial stability without dependence. And then the worst, an email chain, printed and neatly filed, between Thomas and a doctor I didn't recognize. In one message, Thomas asked, "What if the patient is incapacitated or unable to make decisions? What are the legal options?" The doctor's response was curt, "Not possible without explicit consent." But below, Thomas had written again, "There must be a way. Hypothetically, what if the spouse provides consent during another procedure?" My chest tightened. Beside the folder was a small black phone, a second phone I had never seen before. Julie snatched it up. "A burner." We powered it on. The passcode screen appeared. 4 digits. "Try 2743, Julie whispered. The screen unlocked. Dozens of messages appeared, threads with someone saved only as A. The most recent message made my blood run cold. A. Is it done? Thomas. Yes. She can't trap me now. I scrolled upward, my hands trembling. Photos appeared, intimate photos of a woman I recognized instantly. Amanda. She worked at Thomas's firm. I'd met her at the company Christmas party. She'd complimented my dress, asked if we were planning kids. She'd smiled in that way women sometimes smile when they already know the answer. Julie cursed under her breath. He's been planning this with her. Another message. Thomas, she wants kids desperately. It's becoming a problem. A. So leave her. Thomas. Not yet. The prenup has a clause. If we divorce without children, she gets half. If she can't have them, it changes everything. A. You're terrible. I love it. The phone slipped from my hand. My stomach lurched so violently I ran to the bathroom, retching until there was nothing left. Julie followed, holding my hair like she had back in college after nights we'd sworn off tequila. When the sickness passed, I sat on the cold tile floor, my body trembling with rage. It wasn't just betrayal, it wasn't just control. It was strategy, calculated, deliberate. Thomas hadn't stolen my choice out of fear or panic. He'd stolen it for profit, for freedom, for another woman. Julie knelt beside me. Claire, listen to me. You have proof now. Emails, texts, signatures. He can't gaslight his way out of this. My voice shook, but steel edged it. Then we use it, every last piece. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening for Thomas's key in the lock. When he finally came home around midnight, I forced my breathing into slow, steady rhythms, pretending to sleep. He moved through the apartment, checking his office. My heart raced. Did I leave anything out of place? Did he suspect? Satisfied, he slipped into bed beside me. His cologne mingled with another faint scent, floral perfume, not mine. He leaned close, his breath warm against my ear. I know you're awake, he whispered. We need to talk about this rationally. You'll see I did the right thing. One day you'll thank me. He rolled over, his breathing evening, out into sleep within minutes. I lay rigid, staring into the dark, my fury burning hotter with every breath he took. He thought he had won, but as I touched the small bandage on my abdomen, a vow formed inside me. You took something from me, I whispered into the darkness. Now I'll take everything from you. The morning after that sleepless night, I sat at the kitchen table staring at the untouched cup of coffee Thomas had made before leaving for work. He kissed my cheek on the way out, murmuring, "We'll talk tonight." I forced a smile that didn't reach my eyes, and as soon as the door closed, the mask fell. Julie arrived 15 minutes later, her face taut with determination. She set her bag down on the counter and rolled up her sleeves. Ready to keep digging? I nodded. My body still ached from surgery, but the sharper pain was inside, a hollow, gnawing wound carved by betrayal. We barely scratched the surface last night, I whispered. There has to be more. Ew. We returned to the office, our footsteps cautious as though Thomas might step out from behind a door at any moment. The burner phone and forged documents already told a damning story, but instinct told me there were deeper layers. Julie opened drawers while I pulled files from the unlocked cabinet. Every folder was immaculate, arranged with surgical precision. It was almost eerie. Thomas's obsession with order was everywhere. But in the middle drawer, behind files labeled 2019 taxes and consulting clients, I found a folder marked with only one word: personal. My stomach tightened as I opened it. Inside were neatly printed emails between Thomas and Dr. Anders. The first dated back nearly a year. Thomas, I'm concerned about my wife's long-term health. She experiences anxiety regarding pregnancy. What options exist for permanent solutions? Anders, I understand your concern, but medical guidelines require your wife's explicit consent for sterilization. Thomas, what if she is already under anesthesia for another procedure? Julie leaned over my shoulder, her lips pressed in a hard line. He was planting the idea months ago. I flipped further, more correspondence, each message more chilling than the last. In one, Thomas wrote, My wife is emotional, often irrational about this subject. I believe she'll regret having children. Isn't it better to protect her now? I nearly tore the paper in my hands. Protect me? He'd twisted his betrayal into a justification, disguising control as care. Julie shook her head. This isn't protection, it's premeditation. At the bottom of the folder was a bank statement, a transfer of $15,000 to Anders Medical Consulting LLC. The date was the day before my surgery. My pulse pounded in my ears. He paid him. He paid Anders to do this. Julie exhaled sharply. That's bribery. Proof of conspiracy. Claire, this is huge. I sank into Thomas's desk chair, the weight of the discovery pressing down on me. My husband hadn't just betrayed me in the heat of a moment. He'd planned this, funded it, partnered with a doctor to carry it out. Why? The word slipped out before I could stop it. Why not just tell me he didn't want kids? Why lie? Why? Julie's eyes hardened. She lifted the burner phone we'd unlocked the night before. Because of this. She scrolled through more messages, her jaw tightening as she read. Then she handed me the phone. Thomas, she's obsessed. She won't let it go. Kids, kids, kids. If I give in, the prenup kills me. A. So handle it. Find a way. Thomas. Working on it. There are doctors. I dropped the phone like it had burned me. My hands shook so violently I pressed them against my lap to still them. He did it for money, I whispered, for freedom and for her. Julie crouched in front of me, gripping my hands. Claire, you need to hear me. This isn't just betrayal. This is fraud. Medical abuse. Criminal conspiracy. We can take him down for this. I stared at her, my vision blurring with tears. Do you think anyone will believe me? He's so polished, charming. Everyone at his firm adores him. He'll spin this like he always does. He'll say I'm emotional, confused, crazy. Julie squeezed harder. Then we find someone who doesn't care about his charm. Someone who cares about evidence. A lawyer who'll eat him alive. That was when she said a name I'd never heard before, Sarah Chun. She handled my friend's divorce. Ruthless. Brilliant. Exactly the kind of shark you need. The word ruthless stuck in my head. For the first time since waking from surgery, I felt something other than grief or rage. I felt resolve. We spent hours photographing everything. Emails, bank records, medical brochures, texts from the burner phone. Julie cataloged each file like a detective, meticulous and relentless. By the time Thomas returned home, we'd tucked every document back into its place, locked the drawer, and returned the key behind the wedding photo frame. I was back on the couch, blanket over my lap, the perfect image of a recovering wife. My stomach clenched as the door opened. Hey, baby, Thomas called, setting his briefcase down. How are you feeling? I forced a weary smile. Tired. He brought over takeout, kissed my forehead, and sat beside me as though nothing had happened. His hand rested lightly on my knee, his touch casual, possessive. You know, he said softly, one day you'll understand I did this for us, for our future. Children would have ruined everything. I turned my head toward him, nodding faintly, feigning agreement. Inside, though, every word etched itself deeper into the wall of evidence I was building against him. When he left the room to shower, Julie and I exchanged a glance. Her eyes were fire, mine were steel. We weren't victims anymore, we were hunters. That night, lying beside him in the dark, I listened to his steady breathing and thought about the drawer of documents hidden only feet away. He believed he controlled the narrative, believed I was weak, malleable, grateful even. But he had no idea that the woman beside him had changed. He thought he'd taken away my choice. He didn't realize he'd given me something else in return, a reason to destroy him. The following morning, Julie drove me across the city to meet Sarah Chun. Her office occupied the top floor of a glass-paneled building that looked like it had been carved from ambition itself. Inside, everything gleamed. Polished floors, steel accents, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the skyline. It was the kind of place where lives unraveled and were rebuilt with the stroke of a pen. Sarah was younger than I'd expected. Early 40s, sleek bob, sharp glasses, and eyes that saw straight through pretense. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. She motioned for us to sit and said, "Tell me everything. Start at the beginning." I did. From the sudden pain that sent me to the hospital, to waking up with a body that no longer belonged entirely to me. I described the forged signatures, the burner phone, the secret emails. I slid the folder across her desk, my hands trembling as though the paper still carried the weight of betrayal. She listened without interrupting, occasionally jotting notes, her expression carved in stone. When I finished, silence filled the room, heavy and assentient, expectant. Finally, she leaned back in her chair. "Claire, this is one of the most egregious cases of medical battery and spousal betrayal I've ever heard." The word battery made me flinch. I'd thought of it as betrayal, deception, manipulation. But Sarah called it what it truly was: violence. We're talking fraud, forgery, conspiracy, assault. Your husband has committed multiple felonies. And the hospital? Significant liability. This goes beyond malpractice. This is criminal. Julie exhaled with satisfaction, like a warrior hearing confirmation of a battle plan. Sarah leaned forward, her eyes pinning me in place. But I need you to understand something. Men who orchestrate this level of control rarely go quietly. They don't crumble. They fight. And when they're cornered, they can become dangerous. A chill swept through me. Dangerous. The word clung like smoke. What should I do? I whispered. Document everything, Sarah said. Every conversation, every phone call, every slip of his mask. And Claire, be careful. Don't let him know you're onto him. The more secure he feels, the more careless he'll become. That's when we strike. Julie reached over and squeezed my hand. I nodded, my throat tight, but my resolve firming. For the next week, I became an actress in my own life. When Thomas came home, I smiled. When he spoke about our future, I nodded. When he kissed my forehead, I forced my body not to recoil. I played the role of the grateful wife, letting him believe his manipulation was working. All the while, I documented everything. I kept a small recorder hidden in my pocket, capturing his words as he rationalized the unforgivable. You'll see, he said one night over dinner, swirling his wine. Without children, we'll be free. We can travel. We can focus on each other. I saved us from a lifetime of regret. I smiled sweetly, masking the bile in my throat, and pressed the hidden recorder in my lap. When he left for work, Julie and I returned to his office, combing through every folder, photographing every document. We discovered our finances were more twisted than I'd realized. Multiple accounts, hidden investments, money funneled into places I'd never heard of. One account held over $200,000, money he hadn't mentioned once in 6 years of marriage. But it was the burner phone that revealed the ugliest truth. The texts with Amanda stretched back over a year, painting a picture of not just infidelity, but strategy. They weren't simply lovers, they were co-conspirators. Thomas, she's too emotional to make rational choices. I'll handle it. Amanda, you're brilliant. Once it's done, we'll finally be free. Thomas, the prenup protects me if she can't have kids. It's the perfect solution. Amanda, when are you leaving her? Thomas, soon, after everything settles. I need her quiet first. My blood boiled with every word. He hadn't just stolen my choice. He'd plotted to discard me like a broken tool once I was no longer useful. One night I found a video file buried on the burner phone. My hand shook as I pressed play. The angle was strange, the camera clearly hidden in a pocket, but the audio was unmistakable. Thomas's voice. Dr. Anders's voice. She doesn't know I'm here, Thomas said. She's emotional about the topic of children, irrational. We need to be very careful, Dr. Anders replied. I'll take full responsibility. Just make sure she doesn't remember specifics. Can you increase the anesthesia? That's not how anesthesia works, Mr. Morrison. Then what do you suggest? If she's already consented to one procedure, couldn't the paperwork be adjusted? A pause. Then Anders's voice, low and heavy. These things happen in emergencies. Families make difficult decisions. Julie gasped as the video ended. That's it. That's the smoking gun. I sat frozen, bile rising in my throat. My husband had filmed his own conspiracy. Arrogance had been his downfall. We uploaded copies of the video to multiple cloud accounts, emailed it to Sarah. Her response came within minutes. This is gold. This proves premeditation. Now we build the case. That night, Thomas slid into bed beside me, smelling faintly of Amanda's perfume. I kept my breathing slow, steady, pretending sleep. I know you're awake, he whispered in the dark. You'll see I did the right thing. One day you'll thank me. His words crawled across my skin like insects. I lay rigid, staring at the ceiling, vowing silently that he would never again decide my future. The next morning, Julie and I met Sarah again, showing her the video and additional evidence. Sarah's lips curved into a predatory smile. With this, she said, we don't just have a case, we have a weapon. Claire, we're going to dismantle him, piece by piece. Her words ignited something in me. For the first time since the surgery, I didn't feel powerless. For the first time, I felt dangerous. That evening, Thomas suggested we celebrate. You seem so much happier, he said, pouring champagne. I knew you'd come around. I raised my glass, smiled, and clinked his. Inside, I was already plotting the moment I'd shatter his entire world. The plan unfolded like theater, every movement rehearsed, every prop placed with intention. I wanted him to believe he was walking into a love story reborn, when in truth, he was stepping onto a stage built for his downfall. I spent the day in the kitchen, moving slowly because of the soreness in my abdomen, but with purpose. I cooked his favorite dishes, rosemary lamb, garlic mashed potatoes, creme brulee for dessert. I set the table with our wedding china, the crystal glasses we'd received as gifts. Candles flickered, casting soft golden light across the room, romantic and deceptive. Julie sat on the couch with me as the oven ticked. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" she asked, her voice low, steady. "Yes," I whispered, though my hands trembled. "I need him to see. I need him to know I'm not his puppet." By the time Thomas's key clicked in the lock, everything was perfect. He stepped inside, carrying champagne, his tie loosened, his smile wide. "What's all this?" I met him at the door, kissed his cheek. "A celebration," I said, letting warmth drip from my voice. Suspicion flickered in his eyes for the briefest second, then vanished under ego. "I knew you'd come around," he said, brushing a hand across my arm. "I knew you'd see I was right." We sat at the table, the food steaming between us. He raised his glass. "To our future," he said. "To the future," I echoed, clinking. He talked as he ate, words smooth, confident. He spoke of vacations we could take, investments he wanted to make, now that we were unburdened. He used the word freedom like it was a gift he'd given me. I listened, nodding, smiling, every moment recorded discreetly on my phone, propped near a candle. When the plates were nearly empty, I rose, smoothing my dress with trembling hands. "There's something I want to show you." He leaned back, satisfied. "A surprise?" "Yes." I walked to the living room, where the television glowed softly. With a tap on the remote, the screen flickered to life. At first, he smiled, thinking it was some sentimental gesture, but then his own image appeared on the screen, grainy security footage from the hospital. He was at the nurse's station, signing papers. The timestamp showed I was already in surgery. His fork clattered against his plate. "What is this?" "Keep watching," I said. The video zoomed in, enhanced by Sarah's team, showing his hand moving across the page where my forged signature already lay. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping. "You're being dramatic again. This doesn't prove anything. You probably signed earlier and forgot." I met his gaze, steady, unflinching. "I also have the video of your meeting with Dr. Anders, the one where you discussed how to do this without my knowledge." He froze. "And the emails?" I continued, my voice calm. "The bank transfer. The text with Amanda. I have it all, Thomas." His face flushed deep red. "You went through my things? You invaded my privacy?" I laughed bitterly. "My privacy? You stole my future, forged my name, paid a doctor to mutilate me while I was unconscious. Don't you dare talk about privacy." The doorbell rang. His head snapped toward the sound. "Go ahead," I said softly. "Answer it." He moved stiffly, like a man walking to his own execution. When he opened the door, a process server stood there, professional and efficient. "Thomas Morrison?" "Yes," Thomas said, his voice tight. The man handed him a thick envelope. "You've been served." Thomas tore it open, scanning the pages. His expression shifted, confusion, anger, dawning fear. "Divorce papers? Lawsuit? You can't do this." I stood tall, my hands steady now. "I already have." He flung the papers onto the table, his voice rising. "We're a team, Claire. Everything I did for us. You're my wife." I stepped closer, my voice low and lethal. "A team makes decisions together. A team respects each other. You made me into something else entirely, your victim. But I'm done being your victim." His face twisted. "No one will believe you. I'll tell everyone you're unstable, that you fabricated this. They'll believe me." I held up my phone, the recording light glowing faintly red. "They'll believe the evidence. Every word you've said tonight is now documented." His jaw clenched. For the first time, I saw real fear flicker in his eyes. Not fear of losing me, fear of losing control. He stepped toward me, his voice dropping to a snarl. "You're insane." I didn't flinch. "No, I'm free." Behind me, the front door closed quietly. Julie had slipped out when the server arrived, giving us this final confrontation alone. For a long moment, we stood in silence. His chest heaved, his fists clenched at his sides. I met his gaze, unblinking, unafraid. Finally, he turned away, muttering curses, retreating toward his office. I stood in the dining room, surrounded by the remnants of our marriage, candles burning low, plates half-eaten, documents scattered across the table. My hands trembled, but not from fear, from release. He thought he'd caged me, that I would stay silent, bound by his lies. But the papers were signed, the lawsuits filed, the evidence secure. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of his collapse, and I was going to watch every brick of his empire crumble. The first hearing felt like walking into a lion's den. The courthouse smelled faintly of paper and disinfectant, but beneath that was something heavier, the weight of people's lives unraveling within its walls. My heart pounded as Sarah led me into the courtroom, her heels clicking with measured certainty. Julie trailed behind us like a bodyguard, her expression carved from stone. Thomas was already seated at the respondents' table. He wore his best navy suit, the one he'd worn to our wedding rehearsal dinner. His tie was perfectly knotted, his hair styled, his wedding ring glinting on his hand as though he were still the devoted husband he pretended to be. At his side sat his lawyer, Richard Brennan, a man with sharp cheekbones and sharper eyes, known for defending powerful men from the vindictive wives they'd wronged. Thomas looked up when I entered, his expression carefully arranged, sadness, concern, even a touch of pity. To anyone else, he might have seemed a man crushed by his wife's instability. But to me, who knew the truth behind those eyes, it was nothing but performance. The judge entered, an older woman with piercing gray eyes that missed nothing. We rose, then sat. Brennan spoke first. Your Honor, my client has been subjected to a campaign of harassment and defamation. Mrs. Morrison has fabricated elaborate conspiracy theories, invaded my client's privacy by stealing personal documents, and now seeks to destroy his career with baseless accusations. She is unstable, erratic, and in need of professional help. I felt Julie's hand tighten on mine, grounding me. My stomach churned, but Sarah rose calmly, her voice like steel wrapped in velvet. Your Honor, she said, we have video evidence of Mr. Morrison conspiring with Dr. Anders to perform an unauthorized medical procedure on his wife. We have forged signatures, bank transfers, and text messages with his mistress outlining his motive. This is not instability, this is conspiracy. Brennan scoffed. We question the authenticity of these so-called recordings. The judge held up a hand. I'll review them myself. Sarah nodded and pressed play on the laptop. The courtroom fell silent as Thomas's own voice filled the air. His words, so casual in the hidden video, now echoed like gunshots. She doesn't know I'm here. Can you adjust the paperwork? She's emotional, irrational. I watched his face as the mask slipped, cracks forming in his carefully constructed image. He shifted in his seat, jaw tight, sweat glistening faintly on his temple. When the video ended, the judge leaned back, eyes narrowed. Mr. Morrison, this is your voice? Thomas opened his mouth, closed it again, then finally muttered, yes. And you deny conspiring to authorize a procedure your wife had not consented to? He straightened, adopting that patronizing tone he'd so often used on me. Your Honor, my wife was terrified of pregnancy. She'd had panic attacks about it. She wanted children only because of societal pressure. I made the difficult choice she couldn't make for herself. The judge's voice sharpened. You sterilized your wife without her consent. Thomas's jaw tightened. I protected her from a mistake. The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah let it hang for a moment before sliding more documents across the table. Bank records, Your Honor. A $15,000 payment from Mr. Morrison to Dr. Anders the day before surgery. Brennan objected, but the judge overruled. Then, Sarah pulled out printed screenshots, each one projected onto the courtroom monitor. Text messages between Thomas and Amanda. Amanda, when are you leaving her? Thomas, soon, after everything settles. The prenup protects me now. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Reporters scribbled furiously, already sensing a headline. Thomas slammed his hand against the table. She hacked my phone. This is stolen. Your Honor, Sarah cut in smoothly. These messages were retrieved from a secondary phone in Mr. Morrison's office. The lock code was his long-used personal number. The evidence is authentic, chain of custody documented. The judge nodded, unimpressed with Thomas's outburst. Brennan shifted tactics. Your Honor, even if these messages are genuine, they prove nothing about consent. Mrs. Morrison signed the form herself. Her signature is there. Sarah held up the forged form. And yet, handwriting experts confirm it is not her signature. Note the differences. The curve of the Y, the slant of the C. We will call the expert witness at trial. The judge's eyes swept over Thomas like a scalpel. Mr. Morrison, this evidence is deeply concerning. I am forwarding it to the district attorney's office for review of possible criminal charges. Thomas's composure cracked, his face flushed, his fists clenched. This is madness. She's lying. She's hysterical. She's... Enough, the judge cut in, her voice firm. This hearing is to determine the restraining order you filed against your wife. Given the evidence, the request is denied. Furthermore, Mr. Morrison, you are instructed not to contact Mrs. Morrison outside of legal counsel. Do you understand? His lawyer answered for him. Yes, Your Honor. The gavel struck. The session ended. Thomas stormed out of the courtroom, Brennan hurrying behind. Reporters swarmed him in the hallway, shouting questions. His face twisted with barely restrained rage as he shoved past them. Inside the courtroom, Sarah exhaled, then placed a hand on my shoulder. Round one to us, she murmured. Julie grinned fiercely. That's the first brick, Claire. Now we start pulling the whole wall down. But even in victory, I couldn't shake the image of Thomas's eyes when the judge spoke of criminal charges. There had been fear there, yes, but also something darker. A man who'd lost control. A man who might do anything to get it back. That night, back at Julie's apartment where I was staying temporarily, I lay awake listening to the city hum outside. The scars on my abdomen throbbed, a reminder of what had been stolen. But I traced them with my fingertips and whispered to myself, not broken, not finished. For the first time, I believed it. Yet as I drifted towards sleep, I couldn't shake the question burning in my chest. How far would Thomas go now that his mask had cracked in public? The answer, I feared, would come soon enough. The story hit the media like wildfire. The first headline appeared in the local paper 3 days after the hearing. Woman sues hospital after husband secretly approves sterilization. By noon, reporters camped outside Sarah's office. By evening, national outlets were calling. Everywhere I turned, my name was a headline. Some praised my courage. Others dissected my marriage, painting me as either naive or complicit. Strangers on the internet debated my life as though it were an episode of television. I gave one interview, carefully controlled, filmed in Sarah's office with Julie by my side. I kept my voice calm, my hands folded in my lap. This isn't just about me, I told the camera. It's about every patient who's been silenced, every partner who's been told they don't get a say in their own body. Consent is not optional. Autonomy is not negotiable. That soundbite went viral. The hospitals scrambled, issuing statements about their commitment to patient safety. Dr. Anders was suspended pending investigation. Through his lawyer, he insisted he'd followed protocol. But then the phone call came. It was Kelsey, the nurse who'd whispered the truth to me in the recovery room. Her voice was shaky, nervous. I'm not supposed to be talking to you, but you need to know something. This wasn't the first time. My chest tightened. What do you mean? We met at a diner off the interstate, a place with flickering neon lights and booths sticky with syrup. Kelsey sat across from me, glancing over her shoulder every few seconds. Dr. Anders has done this before, she whispered. At least 3 times that I know of. Always women whose husbands had concerns. Always during unrelated procedures. The hospital knows. Why didn't anyone report it? My voice trembled with fury. I did, she said bitterly. They told me I misunderstood, that the procedures were medically necessary. One nurse pushed harder. She was fired for violating patient privacy. I've kept copies of things, emails, notes. I was just waiting for someone brave enough to fight. She slid a flash drive across the table. Everything's on there. Be careful. Anders has powerful friends, wealthy patients who've paid him well for his flexibility. My hands shook as I closed my fingers around the drive. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. This wasn't just about me. It was systemic. When Sarah opened the files later that night, her eyes hardened. 3 other women. One discovered the truth years later and took her own life. Another divorced quietly, but never pursued legal action. The third, she's in a psychiatric facility, gaslit until she believed she was insane. The room went quiet, heavy with grief and rage. This changes everything, Sarah said finally. We're not just suing anymore, we're exposing a network. And the media storm intensified. Reporters clamored for details. Advocacy groups reached out, wanting me to speak at rallies, to become a voice for women who'd been silenced. I wasn't sure I was ready, but every time I traced the scars on my abdomen, I remembered what had been taken. Silence was no longer an option. Then Amanda reached out. Through Sarah, she sent a message. I want to testify. Julie nearly exploded when she heard. Testify? The mistress? Are you kidding me? But Sarah remained pragmatic. If she has evidence, we use it. Against my instincts, I agreed to meet Amanda at a coffee shop downtown. She looked different than I remembered. Thinner, paler, her expensive clothes hanging loose. She fidgeted with her phone, her eyes darting around nervously. I didn't know, she blurted the moment she sat down. I swear, Claire, I knew he was married. I knew it was wrong, but I didn't know what he was planning for you. I thought he just didn't want kids with you. Her voice cracked. When I realized what he'd done, I ended things. He tried to control me, too. Started tracking my phone, showing up at my gym, telling coworkers I was unstable. He's not just manipulative, he's dangerous. I stared at her, my anger boiling beneath the surface. You thought he'd leave me for you. You thought destroying my marriage was worth it. Her eyes filled with tears. Yes, I was selfish, but I wasn't part of this. I can prove it. I have texts where he called you the Claire problem. I thought it meant divorce. Now I know better. She slid a flash drive across the table. Take it. Do whatever you want with it. Later, Sarah confirmed the texts were real. They showed Thomas's patterns stretched back further than even I'd known. Comments about controlling past girlfriends, pressuring them, manipulating them. Amanda had been his latest, but not his first. The case swelled, transforming from a private betrayal into a public reckoning. 3 other women joined our lawsuit, turning it into a class action against the hospital. Advocacy groups rallied behind us, organizing marches outside the courthouse. Meanwhile, Thomas's life crumbled. His firm placed him on leave, his colleagues whispered behind his back, and Amanda's testimony leaked to the press. The image of the polished financial consultant shattered, replaced by headlines about betrayal, fraud, and conspiracy. Anders fared no better. Financial records subpoenaed by Sarah's team showed multiple large deposits from wealthy husbands over the years, payments eerily similar to Thomas's. Emails between hospital administrators surfaced, acknowledging liability concerns while praising Anders' ability to attract high-value patients. It wasn't just one doctor, it was a system built on silence and complicity. At night, though, when the cameras turned off and the protests quieted, I was left with my own scars. The grief came in waves, sharp, sudden, drowning. One evening, I walked past a baby store and collapsed on the sidewalk, sobbing so hard strangers stopped to help. I couldn't explain to them that I was mourning children who had never existed, futures stolen before they could be chosen. But with each breakdown came something else, resolve. Every tear fueled my determination to fight harder. One night, while Thomas's lawyers filed motions and Anders' defenders tried to spin the story, I stood on the courthouse steps, surrounded by flashing cameras. My voice shook at first, but then it steadied. They thought they could silence us, I said. They thought they could rewrite our futures while we slept. But every scar we carry is proof of survival, and survival is louder than silence. The crowd erupted in applause. For the first time, I didn't feel like just Claire Morrison, the betrayed wife. I felt like a voice for something bigger. But I also knew what Sarah had warned me from the start. Men like Thomas don't go down without a fight. And his fight was coming. The criminal trial began 3 months later, but by then, Thomas's life had already collapsed in on itself. He no longer looked like the polished man I once knew. His hair was unkempt, his suit rumpled, dark circles hollowed his eyes. Amanda had ended things, and his colleagues had turned their backs. Even his own family had distanced themselves. His mother leaving me a tearful voicemail apologizing, saying she didn't know how her son had grown into a man capable of such cruelty. The courtroom was packed the first day, cameras lined the hallways, protesters held signs outside. Inside, the prosecution laid out the case piece by piece, the forged consent form, the bribery, the video recording, the burner phone texts. Each item added another nail to the coffin of his defense. Thomas took the stand, still clinging to the role of misunderstood husband. My wife was irrational, he said smoothly, his voice pitched with feigned concern. She begged for children but panicked at the thought of pregnancy. I made the decision she couldn't make, out of love. The prosecutor's voice cut like a blade. Out of love? You sterilized her without her knowledge, without her consent. You forged her signature, bribed a doctor, and conspired to remove her autonomy. That's not love, Mr. Morrison. That's control. For once, Thomas faltered. The jury deliberated less than 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. The sentence, 8 years in prison. I sat in the gallery, my hands clasped in my lap. When the gavel struck, I didn't cheer. I didn't cry. I only exhaled, the sound shaky and hollow, as though years of breath had finally escaped me. Justice had been served, but my scars remained. Anders, too, faced his reckoning. Stripped of his medical license, sentenced to serve time after his plea deal, his name became synonymous with betrayal of trust. Yet even then, it felt like too little, too late for the women he'd violated. One of them attended court beside me, her hand trembling in mine as we listened to his sentencing. When it was over, the cameras swarmed me, microphones shoved toward my face. I gave only one statement, my voice firm, resolute. This isn't about vengeance. This is about truth, about choice, about making sure no one else ever wakes up to discover their future has been stolen. The months that followed were a blur of headlines, interviews, and speaking invitations. At first I resisted, wanting nothing more than to disappear, but each message I received from women, strangers who told me their stories of reproductive coercion, partners who had tampered with their birth control, doctors who dismissed their voices, reminded me that silence was complicity. So I spoke. I testified before committees. I stood at rallies. I launched a foundation, the Claire Morrison Center for Medical Autonomy. Julie became its first director, fierce as ever, protecting every woman who walked through our doors. We provided legal resources, counseling, advocacy. We turned pain into action. Still, the grief was never far. It hit me hardest in quiet moments, a baby stroller passing on the sidewalk, a lullaby drifting from an open window, the sight of children laughing in the park. Grief for the children I'd never bear. Grief for the family that had been erased before it could exist. My therapist reminded me often, grief comes in waves, and waves, no matter how strong, always recede. 2 years later, I chose a different path, not because I needed to replace what was stolen, but because I still wanted to be a mother. Adoption. Her name was Sophia, 7 years old, wary eyes that had seen too much. She tested me for months, certain I'd abandon her like others had. But slowly, trust grew. One morning she called me Mom, so casually it nearly broke me. A year later, at her school's mother-daughter breakfast, she introduced me proudly to her teacher. This is my mom. She chose me. The weight of those words left me breathless. Choice. The very thing stolen from me, now given freely by a child who finally felt safe. Life didn't return to what it was. It became something new. I moved to a small cottage by the sea, waves lulling me to sleep at night, salt air replacing the city's exhaust. Marcus, a widower who owned the local bookstore, became part of my life slowly, gently. He never tried to fix me. He only held space for my scars, his presence steady, unthreatening. His children accepted me in time, and together we built something fragile but real. One night, as Sophia played in the surf and Marcus read on the porch, I stood at the shoreline, watching the moonlight scatter across the waves. My scars tugged faintly in the cool night air, small lines on skin that told a much larger story. I thought of the woman I'd been before the surgery, trusting, naive, secure in a life that wasn't as safe as I believed. She was gone. In her place stood someone harder, but not broken. Someone who understood that power isn't given, it's taken back. I whispered into the sea breeze, not to Thomas, not even to Anders, but to myself. They took away my choice, but they didn't take my voice. And that voice had grown louder, strong enough to change laws, to change lives, to carry Sophia's laughter into a future that was finally ours to write. The tide surged at my feet, cold and bracing. I closed my eyes and let it wash over me, carrying away the last remnants of the life I never chose. This was my story now, and I was the only one who would ever write its ending.